Superheroes, for decades, they've been a source of inspiration and hope, symbols of justice and righteousness. Caped crusaders flying through the skies, battling villains, and saving the world in their iconic suits. From Superman to Spider-Man, these characters have defined pop culture for generations, representing the best of humanity. But what happens when the cape falls, when the mask slips, when the heroes we worship are just as flawed, if not worse, than the rest of us? Enter The Boys. A show that didn't just break the mold, it shattered it into a million bloody, satirical pieces. By the time The Boys premiered on Amazon Prime in July 2019, the world was in the midst of an unprecedented superhero boom. Marvel's Avengers: Endgame had just obliterated box office records, and DC was struggling to maintain relevance with its darker cinematic universe. Superheroes were everywhere, in movies, TV shows, comics, and even advertisements. For fans, this was paradise. For others, it was fatigue. The genre was becoming predictable. The heroes saved the day, the villains were defeated, and good triumphed over evil. The formula worked, but it was becoming stale. That's where The Boys stepped in. Based on the comic series by Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson, this show wasn't just another superhero story, it was an anti-superhero story. It dared to ask the uncomfortable questions. What if superheroes weren't the paragons of virtue we've been led to believe? What if they were selfish, corrupt, and driven by greed? And what would happen to the ordinary people caught in their crossfire? From the very first episode, The Boys grabbed its audience by the throat and refused to let go. The opening sequence wasn't a flashy battle or a heroic rescue. It was a tragedy. Hughie Campbell, a mild-mannered electronics store employee, watches in horror as his girlfriend is obliterated by A-Train, a speedster superhero who doesn't even bother to stop. Her death is gruesome, accidental, and entirely ignored by the world because in this universe, superheroes are untouchable. This sets the tone for everything that follows. Superheroes, known as Supes in the show, are not the noble saviors we know. They're corporate assets managed by a mega corporation called Vought International. They're flawed, dangerous, and morally bankrupt, hiding their misdeeds behind PR campaigns and carefully crafted personas. The show peels back the curtain on their lives, revealing a dark underbelly of abuse, corruption, and unchecked power. The titular Boys, led by the vengeful and unhinged Billy Butcher, are a group of vigilantes dedicated to exposing the Supes for what they truly are. Their mission isn't just personal, it's existential. They're fighting to prove that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. What made The Boys a game changer wasn't just its premise, but its execution. The show didn't hold back. It leaned into its darkness, using shocking violence, biting satire, and sharp social commentary to deliver its message. But beneath the blood and chaos, there was depth. Superhero stories have always been about ideals, truth, justice, and the greater good. The Boys flipped that script. In this world, the Supes are a product of capitalism, driven by profit and controlled by a corporation more interested in stock prices than saving lives. Characters like Homelander, a twisted parody of Superman, embody this perfectly. He's powerful, charismatic, and deeply terrifying, a man who craves love and worship but is incapable of empathy. This deconstruction of the hero myth struck a chord with audiences. It was a reflection of the cynicism many feel about modern institutions, governments, corporations, and even celebrities. The Boys forced viewers to confront uncomfortable truths about power and accountability, all while delivering a gripping narrative. At its core, The Boys isn't just about superheroes, it's about people. Hughie's journey from an ordinary guy to a reluctant vigilante is deeply relatable. His grief, anger, and moral dilemmas ground the story, making it more than just a spectacle. Each member of The Boys, Butcher, Frenchie, Mother's Milk, and Kimiko, has their own traumas and motivations, creating a rich tapestry of characters who feel real. On the flip side, even the Supes are given depth. Characters like Queen Maeve and Starlight struggle with their own moral compasses, trapped in a system they can't escape. These nuanced portrayals blur the lines between hero and villain, making the show as emotionally complex as it is thrilling. The Boys isn't afraid to tackle big issues. From corporate greed and celebrity culture to sexual harassment and systemic racism, the show holds up a mirror to society and asks its audience to take a hard look. The Seven, the show's Justice League equivalent, are a microcosm of power dynamics, with each member representing a different facet of corruption. Vaught's exploitation of tragedy for profit mirrors real-world debates about corporate responsibility. The Church of the Collective, a satirical take on Scientology, highlights the dangers of cults and blind faith. This willingness to engage with real-world issues gave The Boys a sense of urgency and relevance that many other superhero stories lacked. In a world dominated by PG-13 superhero fare, The Boys was unapologetically R-rated. Its graphic violence, explicit language, and mature themes set it apart from the sanitized versions of heroism we were used to. But this wasn't just for shock value, it was a deliberate choice to highlight the consequences of power without responsibility. Every punch, explosion, and death had weight, making the action feel more visceral and impactful. Homelander isn't just a villain, he's the villain. Unlike the mustache-twirling antagonists of traditional superhero stories, Homelander is terrifyingly human. His insecurities, ego, and need for control make him unpredictable and compelling. He's a reflection of what happens when power goes unchecked, and his presence looms over every scene, even when he's not on screen. The impact of The Boys can't be overstated. It proved that superhero stories don't have to follow the same formula to be successful. It opened the door for more experimental takes on the genre, inspiring shows like Invincible and Peacemaker. It also challenged audiences to think critically about the media they consume, asking questions about hero worship, accountability, and the nature of power. More importantly, The Boys demonstrated that there's room for nuance in a genre often dismissed as shallow. It didn't just entertain, it provoked, challenged, and at times unsettled its viewers. As we look to the future, it's clear that The Boys has left a lasting mark on superhero media. Its success has shown that audiences are hungry for stories that push boundaries and defy expectations. Whether through its dark humor, complex characters, or unflinching critique of power, The Boys changed the game. In a world where superheroes have become a cultural phenomenon, The Boys dared to ask, what if the real villains were the heroes all along? And in doing so, it redefined what superhero stories could be, proving that even in a saturated market, there's always room for something bold, fresh, and brutally honest.